And there we are. So welcome y'all to our November TMN Tuesday. We're excited to have some fantastic speakers here today sharing about an emerging issue here in Texas that is of concern for everybody in Texas. And so we're going to have our master naturalists educated on this important topic. Before we get started today, Hannah, if you'll go to the next slide for us. As always, we want to share our virtual meeting room etiquette. I know we've done this 11 months out of the year already, but it's important to reiterate every time that we are able to meet with y'all. We are getting started here right at noon, and we did start the recording. So if you're not able to join us live, or if you have to run out halfway through, you are able to watch the recording that will be posted on our TMN Tuesday page. That's linked there with the QR code by this afternoon, if not first thing tomorrow morning. We do have the chat function open today for on-topic and professional and respectful conversation only. Hannah and I will be working as your chat moderators and asking those questions to our speakers we're going to be asking those questions for you, so help us with your spelling and grammar so that we can interpret your question as intended. We are running this session for 1 hour of advanced training. Please use your chapter VMS director to help get that logged. And again, if you have any questions, ask those in chat for us. Last but not least, as we're getting started with our 11th TMN Tuesday of the year, we've been using this voluntary survey every month to help us remain eligible for funding that helps pay for events like this. Hannah's going to drop the link in the chat here in just a little bit, where you can use that QR code to respond to this quick 4-5 question survey and be able to help provide that feedback that we need for future events. And then if you'll go to the next slide for me, please, ma'am. Oh, there is one more announcement. I apologize before we jump into the topic today. Our last TMN Tuesday for calendar year 2025 is our joint TMN Tuesday and chapter leadership meeting, with our chapter presidents and advisors joining that chapter leadership portion of the event. And we'll be using that opportunity to go, that webinar opportunity to be going over our updates to our guiding documents that we've updated in 2026. That includes our chapter bylaws, our chapter management and operations protocols, and our chapter operating handbook template that has been transmitted to all of your chapter leadership. It's a great way to look at all of the ways that our program is aligned, managed, and governed. And then the last governing document, or last document that we're going to be sharing updates on, are the brand guide that Hannah's been working on to make sure that you are out there representing the Master Naturalist program with the appropriate branding and logos and materials at your disposal.
Just a quick reminder, you haven't seen anything on socials about this yet because I haven't posted it yet. It's going to follow the same 2 weeks prior posting schedule, so don't freak out when you don't see it on the website and the socials just yet. It's going to follow that same posting schedule that we've been doing, so that information will be out for you and your chapter members.
Perfect. All right, now, Richard, I'm going to let you introduce our fantastic speakers today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mary Pearl. Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Heilbrunn. I work for Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. I'm filling in for Michelle Haggerty as she takes a much-deserved vacation, international vacation. So we're pleased to have just over 200 people with us today, and we're especially delighted to have our speakers, Dr. Hunter Reed and Dr. Sara Wyckoff. Dr. Hunter Reed received his veterinary degree from Cornell University and his MPH degree from the University of Minnesota. Currently, he is a wildlife veterinarian for the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, where he investigates a wide array of wildlife diseases across Texas, in addition to assisting with wildlife health policy, rural development, and research. Dr. Sara Wyckoff completed her undergraduate degree at Arizona State University, followed by veterinary school at Midwestern University. She's worked with wildlife across the U.S., including Florida, Massachusetts, and Arizona, before joining Texas Parks and Wildlife in 2022. Her special interests include wildlife disease ecology and animal welfare. And they are going to present to us today on New World Screwworm, a re-emerging threat to Texas. And I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Hunter Reed. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Richard and Mary Pearl. It's good to have you all here again. I know I presented a little while back, but another animal health topic here, quite pertinent to Texas. So Sara and I are going to split this up. She'll do the first half, and I'll do the second half, and I'm going to have to drive for her through this presentation. So hopefully things go smoothly. If not, you can blame it on me. But with that, Sara, do you want to start off?
Yes, and so are you sharing the screen, Hunter? Because now I don't see our presentation.
No, Richard, if you'll
Yep.
use your host privileges and assign Sara as or assign Hunter as the presenter, please.
I got it. I'm already screwing up.
All right, perfect. So we're going to be here talking about New World Screwworm. It is a reemerging threat, so I'm sure a lot of you have already heard about it recently. And it is something where it's going to seem very doom and gloom. We apologize in advance for that, but it is definitely a severe and significant disease that we do need to be aware of and on the alert for. And so, Hunter, if you can go to the next slide, please. So a little bit about screwworm itself and the biology. So NWS is New World Screwworm, and that is a species of fly, Cochleomya omnivorax. And so automatically with that name, omnivorax means man-eater. And so that kind of gives you a hint that this is something that is pretty significant and sounds kind of scary. And so what this is it is a type of blowfly. And so think of those bright green or bright blue flies that you see kind of around rotting food or maybe like rotting meat. It's similar to that, but while those flies will all feed on necrotic, dead, and rotting things, New World Screwworm, those maggots feed on living tissue only. And that's going to be from warm-blooded animals. So that includes mammals, that can include birds, and that includes people. We are warm-blooded. So this is considered a zoonotic parasite. And what it does is it infests wounds as small as a tick bite, but of course larger wounds as well. Basically anything that's a wound can attract these flies to that wound, and also mucous membranes as well, which don't even have to have a wound for that attraction to come. And so when we say mucous membranes, we are thinking like eyes, nose, mouth, genitalia as well, ears can be a part of that as well. And so with this maggot that feeds on living tissue, as you can imagine, that's not good. Now we have this wound that was maybe a small tick bite, but as these maggots are in there and they're eating, they're making that wound become bigger, deeper. They can attract more screwworm flies, but then also if the wound becomes infected, other type of flies can go in there. And that infestation of larvae and maggots is called myiasis. So severe myiasis can cause death when left untreated when it comes to screwworm. And so this is a significant disease for agricultural, human, and wildlife health. We had back in the day when this was in America, livestock was heavily affected. There's not a lot of information about wildlife, but there were reports of deer being affected, which we'll discuss later. And then again, of course, humans can get this. And these flies can travel up to 50 miles a day looking for food. And so they do have the capacity to travel not only themselves, but on any type of animal that might have some maggots that moves across the environment. So next slide, please. So a little bit more about the biology of New World Screwworm. So we have your male and a female adult flies. And so what they're going to do is they're going to mate. And something important about this life cycle with screwworm specifically is that the females will only mate once in their lifetime. So once they mate, they will go and they will find a wound or some type of orifice or a mucous membrane to lay their eggs on. And so they can lay a few batches of eggs from that one reproduction. And so you can have a few hundred eggs laid across a wound or a couple of different wounds from one female fly. Once those eggs are laid on the wound, they will hatch within 12 to 24 hours. And then the maggots that come out will go through 3 growth stages or larval stages, where they are the small little maggots, which we've all seen like tiny, tiny grains of rice maggots. and then they get a little bit bigger, and then they get to their L3 stage. The L3 stage is very important when it comes to the screwworm life cycle, because this is the size of larva that can fall from the wound or from the orifice, go on the ground, and pupate. And by pupating, they're going to be turning back into a breeding adult. So when it comes to screwworm, being able to get to larvae before they are L3 and ensure that larvae aren't falling down and potentially pupating is very important when it comes to mitigation. All right, next slide. Oh, and that cycle can happen as fast as 21 days or up to around 45, just kind of temperature dependent. And so for this slide, we're not asking anybody to be master screwworm identifiers. This is pretty much done in the lab by entomologists whenever we send in any suspect cases of maggots or flies. But just some things to note is that they do have bright red to orange eyes, and there's 3 lines on the thorax as pointed out in that picture, with a shorter center line compared to the 2 lateral lines. They are metallic blue in color, and they're considered a relatively large fly, so larger than a housefly. Which again, if you've seen any of those blowflies that come around rotting food or rotting flesh, they're bigger than your normal housefly. And there is also something called the secondary screwworm, which is Cochleomya malaceria. And so those are some of the common screwworms that we have seen when we've sent in a sample that is concerning for New World screwworm. It turns out that it's the secondary screwworm. Next slide. So this is a warning. There are some harsh and some graphic images up ahead. This isn't some type of scare tactic or, again, anything to try to gross people out. This is unfortunately the reality of screwworm, and these are real cases that people have seen. Next slide. So this is an example of a key deer that was infested with screwworm back in 2016 when there was a reintroduction of screwworm into the US. And so you'll see a pretty significant wound here on the antler base. That's not uncommon, especially in rut season for deer where they're fighting. They have their wounds from fighting as well, especially they can get wounds at the base of the antlers. And so that's a perfect site for New World screwworm to set up. And so this, again, started as a small wound, not like this, but as more females came in and laid eggs, as the maggots continue to feed, they create these large extensive wounds, and it's not unusual to see bone exposed with some of these. Next slide. So again, this is just another example of a screwworm in a key deer out in Florida. So again, that's a very large extensive wound. It didn't start like that. But that is what happens when screwworm continues to manifest into these wounds and create these large lesions. So that's one of the most common clinical signs reported when it comes to livestock or wildlife or any animal that has New World screwworm is these animals are alive, they're walking around, they might be lethargic, but they have these large, gaping, non-healing wounds with a very particular smell. And so, like I said, maggots and wounds, mucous membranes, or openings on living animals is a suspect clinical sign for screwworm. Wounds that have very bloody discharge and a very foul odor. From people that we have talked to who have worked with screwworm in the past, they said that it is a very distinct odor. And it's something that once you smell it, you kind of never forget it. These wounds will worsen as maggots grow and continue to feed on living tissue. And animals that are showing signs of pain, including depression, irritability, not eating in isolation, are also common. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, this is a re-emerging threat to the US, which means that we did battle screwworm before. Back in the previous to the 1960s, screwworm was all across the southern United States, as you can see here. And so because of the cost that it was costing the industry, $20 million annually back then, that was a pretty big deal. And with the significant impacts on wildlife and populations of livestock, the US created a screwworm eradication program. And between 1962 and 1966, You can see in that kind of light pink side that includes Texas, that is when a sterile insect technique was used to help push screwworm and eradicate it out of the United States, with Texas being eradicated in 1966. And the sterile fly technique is playing off of that fact where the female mates only once. And so with sterile insect fly technique, there are flies that are raised, and during their pupal stage, they are irradiated and made sterile. And so the concept of that is these sterile flies, once they pupate out and become adults, the females will find these released sterile males, and when they breed with them, they will not be able to produce eggs and keep up populations. And this sterile insect technique is the mainstay of eradication then, and it's the mainstay of eradication now. It cannot be done without these sterile flies. And so after 1966, there was a Florida Keys outbreak in 2016, which was detected in October and then eradicated March 17th. So about 6 months later, and 154 million sterile flies were released in order to help fight back against that outbreak. Next slide. And so there is not a lot of data when it comes to wildlife and screwworms in the US at all, but especially for Texas. There are some references of confirmed cases in white-tailed deer, jackrabbits, cottontails, raccoons, and opossums. There's also been a discussion of suspected cases in other animals such as bobcats, coyotes, badgers, armadillos, mountain lions, and foxes. Again, birds, they are susceptible, but not really to the extent that mammals are, and it's believed because of their higher body temperatures, but then also the lack of overall muscling that they have compared to mammals is why they're not the best host. But heavily muscled birds, so like ducks, turkeys, chickens, for example, those ones are more susceptible and have been found with screwworm. And so smaller animals tend to hide and die. And so that could also be a reason why we don't have a lot of historical data when it comes to smaller wildlife species from back then, because of course, white-tailed deer, they're bigger. It'll take a lot more to kind of take them down. And they're also wandering around more and easily for people to see and see what's going on. There were significant impacts on white-tailed deer fawn crops and white-tailed deer populations as well. Some landowners estimated up to 80% of fawn crop loss in their area. And it is believed too that part of the reason for the big bounce back of white-tailed deer within the last few decades has been because of screwworm eradication after the 60s. Next slide, please. And so I discussed this a little bit. This is the sterile insect technique. And so these are pictures from the lab where they create these sterile flies. And so it was developed in the 1950s and coordinated by the USDA. So it uses gamma irradiation of pupae to sterilize these pupa. And then again, when they're hatched, they're both male and females and both are sterile, but the sterile males are the ones that we are most concerned about because wild females will mate with those sterile males at one-time mating, and then the eggs are not viable after that. And so this allows the population to die off after a few life cycles. Currently what we're having right now is about 100 to 120 million sterile flies produced per week. However, that number is not enough right now to combat what is currently going on in South America, Central America, and Mexico, which is why you might have seen reports or heard discussions about new dispersal facilities and production of sterile fly facilities being built. We need at least double these numbers, and most likely more than that, to be able to efficiently push screwworm back to some of its old historical areas. Next slide, please. And so this is a map from USDA just discussing the current situation when it comes to Central America and screwworm. This map is available if you just look up screwworm USDA. They update this weekly and it discusses active detections, from around all of Mexico and Central America. And then it also, some of the maps too will show where they're doing some sterile fly disbursement, where traps are being set. But as you can see, there have been a couple of points up north by Veracruz. The closest detection that we had was Nuevo Leon, which was some cattle that were moved and they had some larvae found on them. But luckily those cases, the larvae were already dying from previous treatments, so there wasn't a concern from spread out there. But something to note is that these maps are just domestic animals and agricultural animals or livestock. We don't really have data when it comes to wildlife movement, reporting, or cases of screwworm. So definitely some data gaps in that sense. Next slide, please. And then this is just another map kind of showing the same thing, just different colors. The most recent detection is going to be this one in Jalisco, kind of on the center. There's a red dot meaning active, and then all of the gray dots are going to be showing inactive. And then so this map will also show SI is sterile insect. And so the green, the sterile insect dispersal polygon, that means that they have ongoing dispersal efforts of flies in that area. And when an active detection like this one in Jalisco occurs, they will also do localized fly dispersals there as well. Right, next slide, please. And so for this disease, even though it is very kind of significant to look at and it can cause death, there are ways where livestock, domestic animals, and even captive wildlife, think of rehabbed animals, they can be treated. And so the first and most important thing for any animal that has screwworm is to remove all maggots from the wound and make sure that those maggots are killed and that they're not let on the ground where they can potentially pupate. And so remove all the maggots and place them in a 70% isopropyl alcohol solution. That's something that you can get at a Walgreens or a Walmart. There's also some approved agricultural or livestock sprays that can help remove maggots. So that's what this Catron 4 is. That's a spray you can kind of see on the label. There's pictures of cows, of a horse. Those sprays are used in livestock to cover a wound and prevent flies from going in there and laying eggs. It's also recommended to clean the wound with chlorhexidine or povidone iodine or soapy water. And then again, using an approved spray or bandage to keep that wound covered and clean so you don't get a new set of flies in there. This is repeated every 2 to 3 days until healed. And of course, very ill animals, complicated infections, or clinical questions should all be referred to your veterinarian. So whether it's your dog cat vet, your livestock vet, your deer vet, all of those will be for veterinary care. Next question, or sorry, next slide, please. And so one of the kind of, not issues, but one of the things that Dr. Reed and I have been dealing with is when it comes to these products, so EPA is going to cover like pesticides, sprays, topicals, and the FDA is going to cover like actual medications that are ingested or injected. And so right now, there are no approved treatments with the EPA or the FDA for wildlife. Any type of drug under the FDA, if it's going to be used in wildlife, let's say again, some type of rehabbed animal, it has to be under veterinary approval, and that's called extra label approval. And the reason of that is because that drug has not been studied in that animal that it's being used. We might not know withdrawal times, especially for animals that might be consumed for meat later. And so those are some food safety and health concerns that the FDA has when it comes to treatments. And the EPA, it's similar, even though these are sprays and they are topicals, there are not any approved for specifically wildlife. As you can see on this slide, it says applicable label is going to be beef cattle, horses, sheep, hogs. And so we've been having discussions with FDA and EPA about what we can do to get kind of wildlife on these lists, get these treatment options available for captive wildlife. So again, rehab centers, deer breeders, zoos. But this is an ongoing conversation that is going on with the EPA and the FDA. Next slide, please. And so this is just what I was mentioning before. These are medications that veterinarians can use when it comes to treating screwworm in some beef cattle, for example, or in a horse. But none of these are allowed to be used legally on wildlife unless a licensed veterinarian is there to allow for off-label drug use. And that's for these medications specifically. Next slide, please. And so prevention is going to be one of the most important things when it comes to mitigating screwworm. Early detection is key. So routinely checking captive animals, especially newborn navels. Navels are found to be the #1 site of New World Screwworm infestation in South America and Central America. So that's very important, getting those newborn navels dipped and cleaned. Quickly reporting any suspect cases. And so livestock and domestics covered under Texas Animal Health Commission. They're the ones who you're going to want to call if you have any suspected cases. And of course, Texas Parks and Wildlife, any type of wildlife. That's what we want to know about. Give us a call so we can investigate the animal appropriately and send in samples. Again, if you are someone that has livestock or has animals outside, clean, cover, spray, and monitor all wounds that are healed. Work with your veterinarian on that. You can treat your own clothing with permethrin as well. And as feasible, schedule branding, dehorning, calving castration, tail docking, antemortem TPWD testing, and working to winter or early spring to avoid high screwworm activity. These flies are tropical, they like warmth, they will not survive in cool weather, I believe under 45 degrees. And so by moving any of these tasks that you have on your ranch or on your farm to more appropriate weather will be helpful with preventing screwworm. Next slide, please. And then this is exactly just showing what I had mentioned, where temperature is associated with fly activity. And so those hotter months are going to have higher fly activity versus you'll see January, December, where the monthly average is lower. There's going to be much reduced fly activity. Next slide, please. All right, now I turn it over to my trusty partner, Dr. Reed.
Oops. Hi, everyone. You get me now. So just to go over kind of how, so now that you know a little bit about New World Screwworm and its biology, I'm going to talk a little bit about what Texas is doing right now to really coordinate our efforts between state, federal partners to try and make sure that we have the most secure response in trying to respond to this emerging threat. So first and foremost, it's really essential for wildlife agencies to really understand where their authority begins and ends on, especially on an issue such as this, that crosses the barrier between wildlife and livestock. So here in Texas, we have a bit more statutory overlap between our wildlife and livestock agencies compared to other states, which is important for us to know. So for TPWD, so we're tasked with conserving Texas's native wildlife. And like with other wildlife agencies, this includes managing both free-ranging wildlife and captive wildlife, primarily through the issuance of licenses or permits, allowing for captive breeding, rehab, zoological expedition, all of which are huge economic activities in Texas, especially hunting. So for perspective, white-tailed deer, one of the species most likely to be significantly impacted by New World Screwworm, it has an estimated can stimulate about $4.6 billion in total economic output each year. So that's huge and definitely worth protecting and being cognizant of. Texas Animal Health Commission, on the other hand, is really is alternatively charged with protecting livestock health and productivity, as well as marketability. And with an estimated $1.8 billion in lost economic activity from New World Screwworm just in Texas alone, THC really has taken a critical role in guiding New World Screwworm response in Texas. And further, the commission has a statutory duty to manage any disease that may also impact domestic or exotic livestock. So really, New World Screwworm is and I guess I should also say, Both our federal agencies must also operate within the constraints of the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations. And I'll address this a little bit later, really talking about how this has important implications for our response. So really, as you can see, this creates an area of overlap where two agencies, state agencies, and really our federal agencies as well, must work hand in hand to really protect Texas and U.S. from economic, ecological repercussions from an incursion of New World Screwworm. So really, consequently, at the direction of our governor, TPWD and THC have established a New World Screwworm response team. And that's been inclusive of state and federal agencies, as well as researchers, veterinarians, animal industry leaders, wildlife professionals, landowners, and more, to really facilitate cooperation between the affected parties, as well as ensure everyone really has a seat at the table as these agencies lead this response and coordinate really our response and messaging activities. And really, there's the primary areas of focus have been on response and communication. So in terms of response, we've worked with this group to really outline and try and establish what would surveillance and reporting look like for each agency. We have different contacts, and as I'll go over later, we work primarily through our wildlife biologists. But with Texas Animal Health Commission, they'll largely be working through livestock producers, sale barns, things of that nature. We've also worked collaboratively on trying to guide movement restrictions and treatment options that really make sense for the varied industries across wildlife and livestock that occur here in Texas. And then equally on the back end is how are we going to coordinate our enforcement efforts between our two departments, just to make sure that really we're trying, if New World Screwworm were to enter Texas, that everyone is really doing their part in following the rules to mitigate the spread. At least in Mexico and some of these other Central American countries, the primary ways that we've seen these very large jumps in movements have been because of illegal animal movements or insufficient surveillance or not catching it at the site of where those animals had originated from. So really trying to make sure that you're following all of these surveillance protocols, treatment protocols, and movement protocols so that other parts of the state and in other states are protected from receiving this pest. And then in terms of communications, this has been a very complicated topic to really coordinate across many different levels: national, regional, state, and then individual public. However, what we've done is worked with USDA, Wildlife Services, and Veterinary Services, in addition to some of our other state agencies, to create fact sheets as well as inform other informational documents on federal sites, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and having a coordinated messaging campaign. And then lastly, really getting out on the ground. We've had many opportunities where our biologists, our state wildlife health specialists, in addition to Sara and I, being able to go out, give public presentations and events like this, just to make sure and raise awareness. We've had a lot of visibility on this issue for livestock and land managers, but we have yet to really, I still receive comments that people don't know what New World Screwworm is in more urban or suburban environments. So really spreading the word and being an effective communicator about this topic is important for us, but also something that I would highly encourage y'all to instigate within your own communities. So in terms of agency capacity and talking about TPWD's own capability for responding to this disease, it's going to be primarily led by our wildlife division. And that includes Sara and I, in addition to our wildlife health specialists, 5 of them scattered across the state to respond to any reports, as well as submit biological samples. In addition, our field biologists are going to be a critical resource for any of those folks that are on their own properties, managed lands deer permit program, or deer breeder program, in addition to zoological permits and things of that nature as well. So those three divisions of folks in our wildlife division have been receiving the vast majority of calls, in addition to being able to direct those and screen them and get them where they need to be so we can get samples from highly suspicious cases. But this doesn't mean that the wildlife division is the only one responding to this. Our state parks division, with our natural area and state park biologists, they also have livestock, in addition to bison in some of these properties that they have to be cognizant of. And of course, our law enforcement division with game wardens, who will likely serve as a resource in making sure that folks are aware of the requirements of moving animals that are permitted by the department, in addition to making sure that folks know what to do in those events that screwworm arrives and they want to do what's best in terms of stopping the spread. So I know that there have been some questions on really how to report these types of things. And really our primary mode of receiving these reports has been through facility owners and landowners. However, the public at large has also been a component of this. And as trail cameras, field cameras are becoming more popular in wildlife photography and getting outdoors and non-consumptive wildlife endeavors, these have served as points of support or reports as well. So this might be something that Texas Master Naturalists have really a direct role and can serve as a real help to the department and be able to funnel these reports to the right people. And by the right people, I typically mean the biologist or game warden in that local area. That biologist or game warden has already been trained to notify their area wildlife health specialists scattered across the state. And they're going to be gathering all of that info about where the animal was taken, what the wound looks like, how many animals are affected, and really send over pictures and things like that, so that when all that information comes to us, Sara and I have all the information to make a decision of whether or not to really go out there and submit samples and say, yes, this is high priority enough. We need to get out on the ground. So if this is a case of an animal that is living with maggots, we have a high suspicion of New World Screwworm infestation. What we're going to do is immediately start notifying our agency partners. So the primary ones are going to be Texas Animal Health Commission, and in addition to Department of State Health Services. They work with a lot of zoonotic disease, and this being a parasite that infects animals and people. We want to make sure that they're aware of this as well. In addition to Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, who has a great capability of being able to funnel information and update a lot of folks all across the state quite easily about animal health issues. And then lastly, our federal partner USDA is going to be critical to this as we work with them to submit those samples to Ames, Iowa, or the National Veterinary Services Laboratory, where they'll get typically an answer about whether that animal or that parasite that's submitted is New World Screwworm or not, and typically between 24 to 48 hours after submission. So as you can see, this takes a lot of coordination across many different folks within our own department, but even with outside of our department. However, this flow has worked very well. We are hoping that we don't get completely bogged down if the situation arises that screwworm were to enter the United States or Texas. However, I'm very confident that at least with the system that we have now, that we'll be able to stay on top of things and make sure that we're investigating reports in a very quick and systematic fashion. So we've already really talked a little bit about the response. And if a detection were to occur, our lead agencies in Texas have really worked extensively with federal partners to design an immediate response plan that addresses the major points of concern related to both livestock and wildlife. And the primary components of this plan address some key topics. One of them is movement restriction. data management, treatments, and disposal. And by movement restriction, what we're talking about is a quote unquote quarantine, essentially not allowing animals to move out of an area unless they really meet some specific requirements. And that means that those animals have some form of visible ID, they've been treated with an approved product, they've been inspected, and they have the paperwork to outline that, yes, I've done all of these things, and it's been signed off by agency personnel. This is primarily associated, at least with our department, as it relates to deer breeder movements, but also can be related to rehab movements and zoological movements as well, depending on if they fall within a zone. For data management purposes, what is really difficult about this part of the equation is that it's hard to really keep track of so many different reports, let alone making sure that what we're doing or follow up on those same reports and whether or not they're really credible or not. So what we're working on is really developing a system with ArcGIS to log all of these public reports and make sure that we know where they are on the map and also associate lab reports with them. We also are able to utilize our TWIM system, which is our primary permitting system for deer breeder movements, in addition to our scientific and research permits, to really make sure that we have up-to-date contact information and know how to reach specific people in the event that they may be subject to movement restrictions. And then also what we've been doing is relying on Managed Land's deer permit program to really be able to make sure that we have lists of contact information. So if we do have a very close incursion to Texas, then we would be able to disseminate that information to the appropriate people securely in a very efficient fashion as well. So it's a little bit of a bear working with several different systems and making sure that we're trying to funnel this information to federal partners. However, we do have existing infrastructure that is quite conducive for that. It's just going to take a little bit of time to make sure that we work out all the kinks. And then for treatments, what we talked about before, Sara and I have been working well with our federal partners and state partners to really advocate for treatments, not just for livestock, but then also make sure that we have options for wildlife as well. And this might vary depending on the context. Always for free range and wildlife, this may not be as applicable. But if we have captive wildlife that we're in possession of and need to move or translocate, then we'll have something at least as an option on the table so that we can do that as safely and effectively and legally as possible. And then lastly is disposal. So disposal is one of those that it might be easier to think about when you're talking about captive animals. A lot of folks prefer to bury, but other options that have existed have been alkaline hydrolysis, incineration. So there's a variety of disposal techniques, and at least in this context here, it's very important that we're properly addressing these infested carcasses to make sure that we're not spreading maggots that are capable of reproduction to other propagation to other parts of the state. Now, there's a lot of issues with this, with these different forms of response. We do have a lot of different options for these. However, trying to marry all of these different wrenches that can get caught up in the gears, such as capacity, data protections, legality, and feasibility, it can be a little bit difficult to navigate all of those. However, what we're trying to do is really overcome some of these barriers and make sure that we're giving folks some very feasible options to be able to really minimize the risks of spreading New World Screwworm through our activities. So at least from the department standpoint, looking at if there's ways that we can increase capacity to address some of these movement restrictions that might be present and required based on if we have a detection or not. Data protections, we've already started working with Department of State Health Services. In addition, we have existing data sharing agreements with Texas Animal Health Commission. Make sure that we're able to funnel all of the pertinent information regarding a possible detection as quickly as we can, but making sure we're doing that in a legal and protected fashion. And then also, as Sara had described earlier, EPA and FDA products. Right now, at least for EPA products, we don't have any options for New World Screwworm treatment, and that's going to primarily include sprays. So that's something that, at least for wildlife or hunters out in the field that might come across an animal that is infested, that's probably going to be one of the few options that would be available to you. So we've worked very hard to try and make sure that, hey, wildlife is still in the picture here. We have hunters, we have landowners, we have captive wildlife facilities that need to be in this conversation, have options to them, have options that are very feasible, but then also legal, of course. And then lastly is the carcass disposal. And we obviously have to think about other complicating factors such as chronic waste and disease in Texas. So we're trying to figure out how we can create carcass management options that really are reducing the risks associated with multiple diseases. And the best case here, and it's now legal under rule, is that folks that have an animal that is infested with New World Screwworm, it is best just to leave the parts at the site where that animal was harvested. And I know that in some situations there may be remnant larvae or anything like remnant larvae that might be still present. However, the best thing that you can do is not move those larvae anywhere else. So really trying to make sure that, hey, if you can't bury a carcass very deeply and compact it, you can't incinerate a carcass, you can at least leave those carcass parts behind if they're infested, and do your best to try and remove and kill as many of those larvae as you can if you do see them. But most of all, please report any of those sightings to the department prior so that we can really have a good finger on the pulse of the situation and where screwworms are and where they are. So really in response, we'll have to continually reevaluate our approach and learn about what works and, most importantly, what hasn't worked. So we don't suspect to have a completely perfect response right out of the gate. There's always complicating factors. And certainly something that might work well in one part of Texas may not be the best fit for all other 170 million acres of this massive state. So this means our approach really to be successful in managing this parasite has to be flexible to really accommodate the logistical and practical constraints that will inevitably arise. So really, hopefully from this presentation, you can appreciate that New World Screwworm response for wildlife is a complex endeavor, not without its challenges. And this is to be expected really for a state that has such varied habitats and species, such as the mountainous Trans-Pecos with threatened bighorn sheep, elk on the high plains of Amarillo, urban wildlife interface in San Antonio, coastal prairies environments with immense cattle production, and endangered species such as ocelots, and then also the highly productive deer populations of central Texas. But however, really this interagency cooperation, establishing primary roles and responsibilities related to agency surveillance and reporting and response has given our Texas agencies really a strong foundation in which we can mitigate the impacts of New World Screwworm on both livestock and native wildlife. So really, this is more of this is really me reaching out to y'all to be aware of these resources, funnel folks to our Parks and Wildlife page on how to find their biologists if they need to reach out and send us sightings or reports, suspected cases of New World Screwworm. And we have a new webpage with plenty of resources on here, with many fact sheets that the department has developed on its own or in collaboration with other partners such as Texas A&M Extension. And additionally, there not only is our page a source of resources, but also Texas Animal Health Commission, USDA Wildlife Services, in addition to Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. So with that, that's the end of my presentation, but I did want to leave you with a quote from Texas Wildlife Association in August 1992 that's saying the return of screwworms could be a full-fledged disaster. Dr. Graham says flatly, south of Highway 90, ranching as we now know it could be impossible if screwworms came back. Livestock and wildlife professionals must be constantly alert to any sign of fly danger and notify their county agents and livestock producer groups immediately. So as you can see, not much has changed in response to this parasite, but I greatly appreciate your attendance today, and your collaboration is going to be essential for all of us working together on protecting Texas from this parasite. Thank you.
Wonderful, Hunter. There are a number of questions that are coming into the chat. I think Sara has been answering questions as you were while she was speaking. So we do have a few more minutes. Are you willing to stick around and answer some questions for us?
Absolutely.
Okay. And Sara, you're reading these questions at the same time that I am. So if you see some that are maybe higher priority or that weren't answered in the topic, feel free to ask those and answer those as well.
Sure, and actually, while I continue to reply, Hunter, there was a couple of questions about carcass disposal in areas such as the hill country that don't have burn bans and burial isn't feasible. And so if you want to discuss that a little bit more.
Yeah, and having been all parts of Texas, very well aware of the restrictions in many parts of these places. And so as I had outlined, as we're worried about other diseases, really leaving any of those carcass parts that you have that you're concerned about at the site of harvest is going to be the best option, especially for hunters and white-tailed deer. With this infestation, small wounds, discrete area wounds, if they were present and you were in an infested area, those could be excised and much of the rest of the animal could be used and consumed. However, for animals that have severe infestations with likely secondary infections, it is best to not consume that animal. And if possible, if those individual maggots can be removed, or a discrete section, a large portion of that tissue can be burned without causing concern, that would be preferable. However, very aware that there's strict burn bans. We don't want to cause more issues. So honestly, at that point, it's just report to your local biologist, and then you can leave those carcass parts on site. But please do not transport any of those parts of the animal that you suspect to be infested to any part of the state, because that's only going to make matters worse.
Hunter, that actually ties into a couple of questions that I've seen in chat about what is the best method for getting a fly or a potential carcass with maggots identified and using. A lot of our master naturalists are used to iNaturalist as their key identifying tool. What would you suggest for a master naturalist out in the field seeing either animal or seeing individual fly species?
Yeah, so as far as any of those reports, like I know that folks use iNaturalist. I know some of the folks in the department that actually look at that quite a lot. Unfortunately, I don't. So the easiest way is to really know your Find My Biologist or the biologist for your county, technical guidance biologists, and really know their number. And if you have a report, send it to them. Also, if it's the game warden in your county too, that they should also know to be able to funnel that to their wildlife health specialists in that region. So either the game warden or the county biologist.
And clarifying the exact means of reporting, you're saying pictures of the identified animal or of the fly itself, not transporting the material to the office.
Yes. Don't transport anything. Just funnel all the information of the who, what, when, where, and why and any pictures that you have. And then if you send that, if you get the contact information of the biologist, they can relay that to Sara and I, and then we can investigate it further.
Thank you. Let's see. While we were talking about that, I missed some of the questions that were coming in. Sara, are there some other questions that might be a good way to lump out and maybe close out the webinar today?
Let me just look through here really quick. We did the identification. I guess roadkill and carcass disposal for that.
Oh, okay. So no, that's a great question. We get it with chronic wasting disease as well. What I can say is that we're working with other state agencies, and we're going to try and initiate these conversations with TxDOT. I guess the one thing that is good about New World Screwworm is that it will need a living animal. So an animal that's dead does not serve as a source of propagating New World screwworms. Now, if it's an animal that was infested prior and then hit by a car or something of that nature, then yes, that animal, if it were to be moved, could transport screwworm larvae to other parts of the state. So really trying to make sure that we're having those conversations with other state agencies to make sure that, hey, be on the lookout for this. Most of the time when they encounter this case, it's probably going to be a dead animal that's has other screwworm larvae. But in those instances where it might be a freshly killed animal, or it might be something that game warden or police officer has to put down, and they notice that animal is infested at that time, that would be something that we would be concerned about, and hopefully we could get reported. So it's more of these conversations are ongoing. I don't expect it all to be perfect right out the gate, but this is going to be something that we can work on. But right now, this is not New World Screwworm's not in Texas. We still got a bit of a buffer, so we got time to kind of work out some of these kinks.
And I think you're reiterating as we're closing in on the 1 o'clock hour that there are resources available through multiple state agencies with this collaborative approach that Parks and Wildlife, Animal Health Commission, and so many other state agencies are taking in order to disseminate accurate information. And that really is the role that master naturalists play as extensions of our state agency sponsors for the Master Naturalist Program, helping to put these resources, this information, this accurate science-based information into the hands of the public and their friends and their communities as well. And so with that, the links that you shared, Hunter, I'll be posting on the website as well, where we post today's webinar recording so that folks can dive deeper into some of the resources and links that you shared with us.
Perfect. Yeah, no, thank you very much. And it's been a treat. And if there's any remaining questions, I think typically Michelle's sent those over, and we kind of try and knock them out as well as we can.
Yeah, Sarah's been doing a bang up job answering a lot of the questions in the chat. So we'll definitely pull the chat questions. And if there are any that are not answered, we'll be sending those to y'all to have follow up afterwards. But really appreciate both of y'all's time today. And Richard, thank you for stepping in for Michelle. And thank you all to the Master Naturalists for, again, being on that front line of communication and education. Thank you, Hunter and Sara.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.